Right, in this video, I'm going to be showing you the new ChatGPT image capabilities. So the image capabilities were originally announced when GPT-4 came out, and they showed a number of examples of different screenshots, as well as a napkin sketch in generating a functioning website. So I'm going to take a similar approach here and see how it actually works in the wild with a couple examples that I throw at it. So in addition to the release of the vision functionality, they did release the ability to speak with ChatGPT and have it talk back to you as well within their iPhone and Android app. So I'm going to be demonstrating that in a future video, but in this one, I'm going to be focused solely on the image portion of it. So in the blog post, they mentioned that image understanding is powered by multimodal GPT 3.5 and GPT-4, but at time of recording, I only have access to the image functionality in GPT-4. So I'm only going to be using GPT-4 in the examples I throw at it. So I'm going to throw three different examples at it. I'm going to ask it to generate me a front-end version of the iconic Google site that we all know and have all used. Then next, I'm going to have it try and generate the landing page for Netflix, which again is pretty iconic, not as iconic as Google, obviously. And then finally, I'm going to throw the equivalent of a napkin drawing at it. So I just had a simple navigation bar, Developers Digest, Contact, YouTube, recent videos, and a bit of a slider. And I just wanted to pass this to it and see what it would do. So I'm going to take three different images here to generate, and I'm also going to take a couple different tech stacks to implement them. So I'm going to try one with Next.js and Tailwind, and then I'll also try some with just raw index, like a raw index HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So what I'll do here, so the first example I'll have it generate, so I'll just drag over the Google screenshot here, and I'll say, generate me a JSX, or let's say generate me JSX and Tailwind to recreate this. So I gave it pretty broad instructions, kept it very simple. We'll see what it comes back with. Now, because we're using GPT-4 and not something like GPT 3.5 Turbo, it will take a moment to run through. So while that's running through and generating for us, we'll just go ahead and create a next app here. I'll just keep all the basic settings, have it install for us. We'll CD into our app, and then we'll just find our directory and the page that we're going to be putting the code in once it's finished. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about while this is running through is I think this will become particularly interesting when they enable the ability for uploading images to their API. So obviously it is useful and powerful to have it within ChatGPT, but being able to unlock something like this for developers will create an abundance of use cases, as you could imagine. So imagine if you had an idea for incorporating, the multimodal capability into your application, being able to actually ping the OpenAI API and pass it an image and have it return code or natural language. Goes without saying how useful something like that would be. And they do have an upcoming developer day on November 6th, and I wouldn't be surprised if that functionality gets announced of being able to use the multimodal capability from their API during this conference. So we see here, we still have our Google homepage component being rendered here. While that is being rendered, we might as well go ahead and just run our server here. So I'll just actually say bun dev run, or bun run dev rather. And so now we have our local host 3001 up here. So we'll have that compile, and now we should have our full component here. So I'm just going to grab it from the return statement, and I'm going to replace everything within the return statement of our application. And you see we just have the boilerplate for Next.js here. Now if I go ahead and save that, look at that. So one shot, one line, it was able to generate not exactly what was there, but it was able to generate pretty close the iconic landing page that we're all familiar with here. So right off the bat, sort of kudos to the implementation here. Now, the next one that I'm going to try here is the Netflix homepage. So I'll say now generate me Tailwind and JSX for this. So the thing I am curious about is how well GPT 3.5 will perform compared to GPT-4. Now, because GPT-4 is obviously their more powerful model, I am going to be curious to see how well the GPT 3.5 model performs. Like, is it going to be able to create something like that in one go, or will it be something where it can create maybe a wireframe, or what are the sort of limitations between the two? So once that functionality is released to me, I will do a bit of a comparison and show you the differences between their different models in the realm of the vision capability in particular. So the other thing that I wanted to show you is, now if you wanted to find a piece of let's say a component on a website, let's say you like the look of this sort of block level section here on Netflix. Now, a way that you can actually easily take a screenshot, so you can take a screenshot of your whole screen and then crop it out, obviously, but a nice little trick that I wanted to show you is if you open up the inspector and then you find the wrapper of what you want to take a screenshot of, you can just simply right click on the DOM element and you can capture a screenshot there. So you can see I have a number of different screenshots here, and then we'll just show you the image of that section there. And this is a thought that I had, is if you try and throw too much at it, obviously it's going to have a harder time, given that there is a context window and length that you have to contend with. So if you're trying to generate, say, this whole Netflix site, it's going to have a hard time generating this homepage here. But potentially if you feed it bit by bit, a block level, section by a block level section, or just like, a particular button, you can get sort of as granular as you want. But I would imagine that the smaller the example that you feed it, the better that it will perform. So now we'll hop back to our Netflix example here. We'll take the return statement just like we did in our Google example. I'll go ahead and close out this Netflix example. I'll replace our return statement here. And there we have it. So we obviously don't have the background image here, but if, again, we compare it just like we did to the Google image, if I go ahead and just drag this up here and put this side by side, we see that we have the general implementation of what was there. So if I take a look here, there's not actually functioning code or anything. There's not hooks that are bound and showing you the drop downs or anything like that. It didn't get all the colors right, which was sort of interesting. So it got the red right here on Get Started, but it didn't get it here on the sign in functionality. So sort of interesting. But overall, considering I just threw this screenshot at it, I'd say that it does a pretty good job. So last but not least, I'm going to throw my basic sketch into it, and I'm going to say generate me an index HTML with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript of this drawing. So the thing that I found in running up to creating this video, so I did try both index HTML examples and Tailwind and Next.js examples. So what I found is the Next.js examples, when you're using Tailwind classes, it is what I found to be the fastest response that you'll get back. So now, even though GPT-4 does take a minute or two compared to GPT 3.5 Turbo, when you're using something like this, and obviously when you're asking for all of the CSS and not leveraging a library like Tailwind, it's going to take a little bit more time to write out all those styles and whatnot for us. But if we just take a look at what it's generating with the image here. Now, the one thing that I noticed is, so I have Developer's Digest as the title, so it took Developer Digest, which is interesting. And if I look through the styling, they're pretty broad styles. It's going to be interesting to see how well this is applied once it writes out the HTML. And so it's going through, it's creating a header for us. Again, it had that minor mistake where it's not picking this up. But again, I have terrible handwriting. I'll be the first one to admit that. But what we see here, which is interesting, that's different than the other examples. And if I just revisit what I asked for, so I asked for the representation of the drawing with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And what I see here as it's putting out the response is it's actually putting out these function invocations on the on click of the arrows here. So it does appear that it might try and implement, and we see here it's just implementing sort of that initial functionality. So it's putting in the on click, but I'd probably have to ask for a subsequent response. I could say, use a slick slider or something like that. But in this example, I'm just going to show you the first response, show you what that looks like. I'm going to paste that within the index HTML here. I'm going to start a live server here, and we see we have a simple but functioning sort of website, right? So we'd have to go in and tweak this a little bit. Obviously, this is much more rudimentary, but when we compare it to the other examples, very basic, but sort of a neat, neat trick that you can go ahead and get some, initial wireframing of a website if you're interested in. So I'd say of these three examples, the Google example was probably the one that was most spot on. Now, if you'd like to see other examples with the ChatGPT vision functionality, let me know in the comments below. I plan to make another video on this. Like I mentioned, once I have access to the GPT 3.5 multimodal capability. But otherwise, if you found this video useful, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and becoming a Patreon subscriber as well. Otherwise, until the next one.